Okay.
Yeah. Most people don't get mine wrong, but I could
I just
see.
wanted to make sure I remembered your name. That's all.
Yeah, people. Uh, you know, it made for an interesting time growing up.
I bet James Brown.
Yeah. The other thing that I've noticed is that there seems to be a line of demarcation. People under 25 have no idea. And when they hear people over 25 talk about it, they're puzzled. They're like, "What is going on here? I don't understand."
Talk about prenups.
No, I'm talking
Oh,
about my
James
name.
Brown. I thought you were going into. Oh, James Brown.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the previous generation, man. It's wild, and they make me feel so old. But yeah, they don't know a lot of things. How old are you, James?
I am 38.
Okay, so
How
you're
old are
not.
you?
I'm. You're not a millennial. I'm a millennial, so I'm 29.
Hey, I am a millennial.
Are you?
Yeah.
When is it?
I
For
thought
some,
I
I feel
thought
like you're.
I thought the cutoff was 82. I thought it was 82.
How? Okay, shoot, maybe. Alrighty.
Yeah. I'm definitely on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. They
Okay.
make me feel so old. They don't know really what CDs are, Walkmans, floppy disks,
Yeah. Yeah.
dial up. They don't know any of that.
If
Netgear, nothing.
hey, if they make you feel old, they make me feel ancient. Talking to teenagers? Oh my god.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. All right. I'll get going. I'll count
Okay.
us in. And it's Deveney Wells Gibson.
Yeah.
Okay. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Deveney Wells Gibson, welcome to Five Things.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad you're here. Let's start from the beginning. How did you become a prenup queen?
Man, beginning when my parents got divorced, and it affected my mom in a way that it shouldn't have, and to the point where she was working 3 jobs to care for me. That's how it originally began. I'm also a divorce attorney, so I practice family law here in San Diego, California, and just seeing my divorce clients, seeing how it's affecting them, seeing how it's affecting their children if children are involved, and just thinking of ways to help mitigate the effects that divorce can have on people. And one of the ways to do that is through a prenup. So prenups obviously don't mean you don't get divorced, but should one occur, it helps them talk about how finances should be looked at, while they're married and living or loving one another, things like that. Because once you get divorced, there is no love, there is no care. It's all resentment, it's all ego. And it's just emotions. So just my thoughts on, I originally wanted to be an attorney to help the kids through a divorce. And I just felt like prenups were almost like a back end way of doing that. But me as a family law attorney in and of itself is really how I'm serving my purpose.
You mentioned your mom and you mentioned how divorces affect people. For us who don't really know firsthand, give us some details. How do divorces help hurt people or affect people?
In several ways. And I mostly talk about how it hurts people financially, but when you're going through divorce, emotions, it affects people emotionally. A lot of people end up having to go through therapy to cope with the divorce process or to cope with how the divorce affected them. Spiritually, for people who are religious, it's testing your faith, testing your beliefs. Mentally, divorce is a process, and it takes a long time, especially when people are litigating and butting heads. Some people's divorces take years, and it's just something that's constantly on your mind throughout that span of time. But most importantly, what I like to focus on is financially. So the average cost of divorce is roughly around 17 grand. That's
Wow.
obviously, Yeah. If they go to
17
court,
grand.
each, not just total, 17 grand per person.
Wow, I
Uh,
did not know.
yeah, and that's if there's no children involved. So once custody and visitation or child support start to become an issue, that figure skyrockets. And so my thoughts are just like that money can be going towards your children's education, vacations, your retirement, things of that nature, that you could be doing so many better things than paying divorce attorneys. Don't get me wrong, that's my practice. It is how I obviously live and pay my employees. But I just believe there are times where divorces, or the cost of divorce, really, it's not necessary. It's really not. So that's one way financially it affects people. The second is when you're going through divorce, you're dividing assets. So the biggest one I like to harp on is retirement. So two different situations. Maybe you're a stay-at-home, someone's a stay-at-home mom. They have no retirement, or maybe a very little retirement because they were working for 5 years, had kiddos, became a stay-at-home mom. They get divorced. Now what? Do they go back to work? Are they going to be able to retire at retirement age because they didn't really have a retirement to begin with? And so they're just in this really unfortunate circumstance in life and having to like figure out how they're going to survive. On the other side, say someone who has the retirement accounts, maybe they're in the military, they have a thrift savings plan, whatever the case is. And then you have to split it based on however long the marriage was. So imagine having all this money in a retirement account, thinking you're going to retire at retirement age, only for it to get split. Now what? When do you actually retire? Do you take a second job? There's just so many things going on. Money going to attorneys, being split. It ends up being a mess. And statistically, divorce is one of the leading causes of bankruptcy. So I just feel like, and I love the idea of marriage. Don't get me wrong. I want to be married, the whole shebang. But I do feel like sometimes people get into marriages without realizing that the divorce rate is almost half. So that means almost 1 in 2 people are going to get divorced, but they're not yet considering the consequences of a divorce. So my prenup queen journey is just trying to combat all that.
So I take it you're single?
I am. I wear a ring on my finger, but I am definitely single. Yes.
Okay. I would imagine as you unfurled all of those details about what the effects of divorce, I would think it would make you more hesitant to actually get married. Instead, you still want to get married.
Oh, 100%. I am a believer of love, marriage being one big happy union, but I'm also a believer of prenups. So like when I go on dates and stuff, when I'm dating, and they're always like, what's your Instagram account? And I'm like, the prenup queen. And they're like, oh, so we're getting a prenup. 100%. And I say that because like I have a business, I do have money, and I want to protect that. I want to protect my future. I want to protect my children. There's so many things financially that I want to take care of so that if a divorce happens, God forbid, I'm still going to be okay financially. It's not going to set me back. It's not going to set my kids back. It's not going to affect my kids. It's not going to affect my business. And those are the things I want to protect. Also, because my business has employees and I want to make sure my employees are set. I just never want anything to affect other people. But also, it just fosters a lot of healthy communication when you go through the prenup process. So we're going to be talking about hypotheticals and, well, what happens when this occurs and how are we going to get past this? And is this really my money? Can I do with it as I please? Or do I have to give you some type of accounting on what I'm doing with the money that should be community? So it just allows for us to set our own rules. And I love that. I think that's golden. So I love the thoughts of prenups, but I also love marriage, and they can totally go hand in hand. And I could still have a beautiful, happy, loving marriage, even though I have a prenup.
I also want to go through some of the things you mentioned a bit earlier. How much does a prenup cost?
Depends. So it depends on where you go, like which attorney you go to or which firm you go to. It also depends on what city you live in. So like here in San Diego, I would say a prenup's probably going to run someone between $2,000 to $5,000, probably more if you're going to like a top firm. Some people even have sliding scales on their prenup. So the more assets you have, because it's more work to drafting, there might be more negotiation. You're probably going to pay more. At my firm, it's just a flat fee. It's $2,250. I think that's just because we handle prenups a little bit differently than most firms do. But there's so many factors that will help you decide on like the price. So it just depends.
And when you're looking around, is $2,200 or so typically the lowest level that you've heard of?
No, because so that's what we charge. I would say there's people who charge less than us, and that's fine. I mean, different competitors looking for different markets, whatever. I would say mine's more so in the middle. I'm not trying to charge more just because people have more. I just don't feel like that's necessarily what I'm trying to do. I understand the reasoning behind it, but again, because my firm does things a little bit differently, and I feel like we're very efficient, $2,250 is all that it takes for our firm to get your prenup done. You come in, notary, that's in the price, you sign. That's just how it works here. But no, I don't think my price is on the lower end. I would say middle.
And you also mentioned that prenups save money. You say that, and that divorces cost roughly 17 grand or so. How would a prenup save money?
So almost like an investment. So, and the way I like to view it is the same reason why you have car insurance. So when I look at a prenup, you're paying here $2,250. You're paying it once. If a divorce happens, instead of paying $17,000, maybe you just pay the court filing fees of $435. You already have all the issues outlined in your prenup. You submit it with the judgment paperwork, have the court sign it, boom, bam, done. So you're paying up front the $2,250 to save yourself the $17,000 plus later down the road. So that's the way I would say a prenup would help you save money in that regard.
What do your clients have in common?
My prenup clients?
Yes.
Thinking about it, I would say, and I'm not saying this is a requirement to get a prenup, but I would say my clients right now, what they have in common, assets. They already have things they want to protect. So that's why to them it's important for the prenup. Although I think all marriages should have one, whether you have something now or you have substantial assets. So I would say they already currently have assets. All of them, without the exception of maybe 10%, they're all roughly around my age. So, which I think is really interesting. So I would say they're millennials, and they're viewing marriage and finances a little bit differently maybe than the older generations, which is why they're going for prenups, which I did see statistically that millennials and Gen Z, I think Gen Z, that's the generation right below us, they're opting for prenups more than the older generations that came before us. So I would say they have that in common as well. Just a different perspective. That's all it is. It's not what the media has portrayed prenups to be, as in prenups automatically mean you're getting divorced. I think the newer generations are starting to see that prices aren't the same as what they were 20, 30 years ago. Things aren't the same. We're not able to retire the same. We can't really acquire the same assets like our grandparents were able to. So they have to take a little bit more precaution when it comes to their finances. So that's what I would say they have in common.
You just said that that prenups are portrayed in the media in a way that you're not happy with.
Mm-hmm.
As a member of the media, feel free to open fire.
Oh my God. Oh, I hope you don't take offense to that. I totally just meant that the way prenups have been previously glorified in the media was like in a negative sense. It's always, and no offense to the white rich men, but it's always the white rich men who have tons of assets that are trying to protect from the gold diggers or trying to protect from the younger women. But honestly, they're for everyone. And there's so many benefits for a prenup outside of just divorce, but there's so many benefits that they will give to couples and individuals that just wasn't portrayed in the media. So the only thing we see in media is prenups and divorce. They go hand in hand, and it's not always the case. So I just think, all right, I should say, I just wish the media, when talking about prenups or whenever a prenup comes up, like there's just like a little bit more discussion behind it, because some people have very valid reasons for wanting a prenup. And I just think it should be talked about more.
You mentioned protecting assets. That'd be one reason. What are some other reasons that you've heard?
So my main reason is fostering the communications. So what I've realized from my divorce clients, also because I'm in the dating pool and talking with friends, family, and stuff like that, there are very important conversations that don't get talked about before people get married. And had they had these conversations beforehand, or had they understood the other person's mentality regarding like kids or assets or money, or understood that their person like had a gambling problem or tendency, if they just had certain discussions beforehand before getting married, I feel like it could have put them on a much better foundation. And that's the main benefit that I like to talk about with prenups. So I love to have my client and their fiance come in, and it's like we're negotiating and we're talking through a lot of issues together, all three of us together. And if the other party wants to have an attorney, then they can have an attorney, and then it's all four of us together. But I just love the fact that it's fostering and encouraging like healthy communication to make sure everyone's on the same page regarding all the terms and things in the prenup. So that's the first one. Yes, asset protection. The other one I like to really harp on is, for example, if one of the people, parties, whatever, have children from previous relationships, I think it's really important for them to have a prenup in place for protecting that child from a previous relationship. And I say that because once, especially if they live in a community property state, they're either in a community property state or a state with equitable distribution. But if they're in a community property state, once people get married, the income that they're making during the marriage is community property. Depending on what they're doing with that community property could create a lot of chaos with their separate property. And at the end of the day, if we can just categorize what's going to be community, people know exactly what's community or separate property, then they can now effectively do their estate planning, their wills, their trusts. And because your will and your trust, your estate laws do not trump community property. So if you improperly do your estate plan, now that's all up in the air. Now you're going to court simply to litigate that. You have to have a prenup or a postnup or something that dictates what is properly characterized as separate property. So once you say this is my separate property, you can do with it as you please. You can put it in a will or a trust, give it to your kid from a previous relationship, because depending on your state's probate laws, that child might not receive anything should you pass. So just being able to properly have it characterized in a prenup is the foundation for it all, in order to properly do your estate plan to then give it to your previous child, or the child from your previous relationship. So I know that sounds complicated, and I'm trying to be very general and very first layer of the issue. But at the end of the day, in order to make sure your child from a previous relationship is taken care of, you probably need a prenup, so that way you can properly do your estate plans.
When you talk to a couple about these agreements, are they already prenup curious? Have they already agreed to do it? Are they divided over the decision?
So I've definitely had people come in where the other spouse was divided, or I shouldn't even say divided. I would just say completely against it. And it's a process getting them on board. But I would say the reason why they were against it is because they don't understand the benefits of it. So once I explain, like, hey, a prenup is supposed to be for both of you guys to come to terms on this. This isn't just one person creating an agreement and you have to sign it. It doesn't work like that. If you don't want to sign it, you don't sign it. But you can negotiate into it. Like, do you need spousal support? Do you need a compensation package? Because the intent is you're going to be a stay-at-home mom. I portray prenups as it needs to be fair for both parties. For it to even be valid and upheld in court, it has to be fair for both parties. So when they understand that fairness is involved, that I'm coming from a place of love and caring for each other, it lessens the emotions. It calms them a little bit more, and now they're a little bit more willing to negotiate. Then we kind of start talking about things, and then we get into the hypotheticals, and all of a sudden now we're laughing about certain things, and now we're happy, and now everyone's on the same page. It's certainly a process when one of the fiancés is already not on board with the prenup, and it does take a little bit more caress to get them on board. But for the most part, I would say when someone comes to me wanting a prenup, they've already discussed it with their other partner. And that's what I would encourage them to do. We are not trying to spring a prenup on somebody. That's just a bad foundation for the marriage anyways. Like, it needs to be something that y'all talk about. If someone's kind of hesitant about it, that's fine. Bring them in and we'll chat through it. But it should definitely be something that both are aware of is going to happen. And then we do have to get both of them on the same page regarding how they feel about the prenup.
What's a postnup? And is it, I would imagine it would be complicated to do it after you have you've been married.
So a postnup is exactly the same thing as a prenup. The only difference is you're doing it after they're already married. So postnuptial agreement. There are challenges with postnups because people are already married. The bargaining powers, it's really no longer there. There's nothing to bargain. You're already married. Because at least in a prenup, it's like, I don't want to get married if you can't sign this, or whatever the case may be. So with the postnup, it's postnups. So postnups are deemed, or presumed, I should say, presumed invalid. And then the person who wants to, if it ever gets challenged, the person who wants to enforce it has to show why it's a valid postnup. On the contrary, prenups are presumed valid, and then if anyone wants to challenge it, it's the person that doesn't want it to stand has to show why it's invalid. So there's different burdens depending on whether it's a prenup or postnup. So the challenge with the postnup, again, like you already said, they're already married. So there's really no bargaining between them or negotiating between them because it's already done. They're already married. There's nothing to bargain. So that's really the only challenge there is. There really has to be a place of, for sure, understanding happening. I mean, I guess you could bargain, like, sign this or I'm getting divorced, but really the person saying they're going to get divorced is still not a bargaining power because divorce is expensive. It's just, it might not even be worth it. Who knows?
Among your prenup clients, I would imagine that some of those couples that are divided on it end up not marrying because they couldn't come to an agreement about this. Am I in the realm of possibility here?
So yes, I have had a few situations that I know of so far where they ended up just not getting married. And I'm not in the business of ruining engagements, but I have had couples no longer get married because they realize, like, whoa, the other person really didn't even want kids. And I'm just like, how did y'all not have this conversation already? But they just realize things where they're no longer compatible, so they end up not getting married. They view finances very differently than the other person. They can't agree on how certain finances should be ran, and finances or financial issues is one of the reasons for divorce. So they just opted to not get married. So going through the prenup process does sometimes highlight incompatibilities, and people just end up not getting married. It is true.
Have any guilt there?
No. No, because it's either they're going to get married, have these same issues arise, and then maybe have kids, and then they're going to get a divorce. So they're going to be back in my office regardless. But then it's affecting them in ways that it just shouldn't. And so just not getting married to begin with is likely way better than them getting married, going through all that, getting divorced, and then it affecting them, and then children, should they have children.
Any famous last words?
Everyone needs a prenup, regardless of your age, regardless of your status. That's pretty much it. Get a prenup.
Deveney Wells Gibson, thank you for joining me.
Of course. Thank you so much, James. I had fun.
As did I. Nice job.
Thank you. I talk a lot, so.
Yeah, I have a request for you.
Go ahead.
Would you be willing to come back in for a part 2?
Yeah, I love talking about prenups, so 100%.
Yeah, so I have an idea. I want to solicit our social media for questions for you from the public, and try to get 5 to 10, and just bat them back and forth with you in an episode that we probably wouldn't air them back to back, but we would. You're obviously pretty boisterous, and I think